Jacob's feet carried him forward before his brain could stop them. The woman at the table had her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking violently, and something about the sight of her, like that made his chest ache in ways he didn't understand. He stopped a few feet away, his heart pounding against his ribs, and cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" The woman's hands froze mid-sob, her entire body going still as if she'd been caught doing something forbidden. Slowly, so slowly it felt like an eternity, she lifted her head and Jacob's heart stopped beating entirely. Her eyes were red and swollen, rimmed with the kind of exhaustion that came from crying for hours. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers and her nose was pink and raw. She looked utterly wrecked, completely undone, and yet there was something about her that made Jacob's breath catch in his throat. She quickly grabbed her napkin and wiped at her face with frantic movements, trying desperately to compose herself, to hide the evidence of her breakdown. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice cracking and breaking in all the wrong places. "This is so embarrassing. I didn't mean for you to see me like this. I should have just left. I should have just canceled. I'm so sorry." Jacob stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, his mind spinning in chaotic circles. The restaurant noise faded to nothing, the clinking of glasses, and murmur of conversations becoming distant and muffled like he was underwater. All he could see was her, this woman who looked so familiar and yet so different from the polished, untouchable figure he knew from work. "Can I sit?" he finally managed, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. She nodded frantically, still wiping at her eyes with shaking hands. "Yes, please. Please sit. I'll try to pull myself together. I promise." Jacob pulled out the chair and sat down across from her, his hands trembling as he placed them on the table. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a living thing. Finally, she looked at him more carefully, her brow furrowing with confusion as she studied his face. "You look familiar," she said slowly, tilting her head. Have we met before? I feel like I know you from somewhere, but I can't quite place it." Jacob's throat went completely dry, his tongue feeling thick and useless in his mouth. He swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I work for you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "Marketing department. 4th floor. I've been there for 4 years now." The color drained from her face so quickly that Jacob thought she might faint. Her hands dropped to the table and she stared at him with wide, horrified eyes. "Oh, God," she whispered, pressing her hand to her forehead. "Oh, God, no. This is a nightmare. I didn't know. My assistant set this up. She's been trying to get me to date for months. She said she found someone perfect. And she just told me your name was Jacob. She never said your last name. She never said you worked for me. I swear I didn't know." She looked at him with such mortification that Jacob felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. Her cheeks were flushed bright red, and she seemed to be shrinking into herself with every passing second. "My sister set me up too," Jacob said, trying to offer some kind of olive branch, some way to make this less painfully awkward. "She just told me your name was Natalia. She said you were a successful businesswoman, but she didn't mention the rest." Natalia let out a shaky, hollow laugh that was more sob than amusement. "This is a disaster," she said, shaking her head. "This is absolutely a disaster. I'm your boss, you're my employee, and I just had a complete breakdown in front of you. This is every nightmare scenario I've ever imagined. Do you want me to leave?" Jacob asked, already half standing, ready to flee from this impossible situation. "No," she said quickly, reaching out as if to grab his arm before stopping herself. "No, please don't leave. I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to salvage this. What were you expecting?" Natalia looked at him, and something in her expression cracked open like a dam breaking. "Someone who didn't know who I was," she admitted, her voice raw and bitter. "Someone who might see me as just a person. Not the CEO, not the money, not the power, just me. I wanted one night where I could pretend to be normal, where someone might like me for who I actually am instead of what I can give them." "Is that why you were crying?" Jacob asked gently, his voice soft and careful. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the table as she decided whether to answer. Then she nodded slowly, a fresh tear sliding down her cheek. I drove here thinking maybe this time could be different, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought maybe I could just be Natalia for once. Just a woman on a date with a man who might actually see her. And then I sat down and realized how pathetic that was, how ridiculous it was to hope for something like that. I'm 32 years old, successful by every measurable standard, and I'm so lonely I can barely breathe some days. Jacob felt something twist painfully in his chest, a sharp ache that he recognized all too well. He'd spent 4 years resenting this woman, the untouchable CEO who sat in her corner office on the top floor while he struggled to make rent every month. The woman who held his career and his livelihood and his daughter's future in her hands. He'd built her up in his mind as someone cold and unfeeling, someone who couldn't possibly understand what it was like to struggle. And here she was, falling apart in front of him, more broken than he'd ever imagined. I've never been loved, Natalia said, her voice breaking completely as she admitted something she
clearly never told anyone before. Not really. Not the way other people are. Everyone who's been with me wanted my money or my connections or my name. They wanted what I could do for them, not who I actually am. Not once has anyone just looked at me and seen someone worth loving. She wiped her eyes roughly, smearing her mascara even more. I see people with families, with children, with someone waiting at home for them, and I feel this ache in my chest that never goes away. I feel like I'm watching everyone else live their lives while I just exist on the outside looking in. The waiter appeared at their table, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional scene unfolding before him. Have you folks had a chance to look at the menus? He asked awkwardly. Not now, Jacob said firmly, not taking his eyes off Natalia. We need a few minutes. The waiter nodded and scurried away, clearly relieved to escape. I'm sorry, Natalia said, shaking her head. You didn't sign up for this. You came here expecting a normal date, and instead you got a crying mess of a woman who can't keep it together. Actually, Jacob said quietly, I didn't sign up for this either. She looked at him questioningly, her red-rimmed eyes searching his face. My wife died 3 years ago, Jacob said, the words coming out easier than they had in a long time. Allison, brain aneurysm. She was 32 years old, healthy, vibrant, full of life. One day she was here, making breakfast and laughing at something Ariel had said, and the next day she was gone. Just like that, Natalia's expression softened, her own pain momentarily pushed aside by empathy. Jacob, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She left me with our daughter Ariel. Jacob continued, the words flowing now like water from a broken dam. She's 8 years old now, and for 3 years I've been trying to hold us together, working 70-hour weeks because if I stop working, if I stop moving, I have to feel everything. I have to face the fact that she's really gone and she's never coming back. He paused, taking a shaky breath. My sister said I'm just surviving, not living. She said I've been dead inside for 3 years and it's time to start living again. She's right, but knowing that doesn't make it any easier. But you had love, Natalia said softly, her voice full of wonder and sadness. You had real love. You had someone who truly saw you and chose you. That's more than I've ever had. I did, Jacob agreed, and losing it nearly destroyed me. Some days I don't know how I'm still standing. They sat there in the weight of their confessions, to strangers who'd stumbled into each other's pain, neither of them knowing what to do with the connection that was forming between them. It was strange and unexpected and completely terrifying, but neither of them wanted to look away. What's your last name? Natalie asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I should know it, but I don't. I've been so disconnected from my own company
that I don't even know the names of my own employees. Morrison, Jacob said. Jacob Morrison. Natalia pulled out her phone and typed quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration as she read whatever appeared on her screen. Her expression shifted from curious to confused to angry in a matter of seconds. Jacob's stomach dropped. What is it? What's wrong? You submitted a proposal 3 months ago, Natalia said slowly, her eyes still fixed on her phone. Client outreach restructuring. It looks incredibly thorough, incredibly well-researched. I spent 2 months on that proposal, Jacob said, his voice hollow. I worked nights and weekends on it. I thought it could really make a difference. It's brilliant, Natalia said, looking up at him with something like wonder in her eyes. This could increase client retention by at least 15%. This could completely transform how we interact with our clients. Then why didn't anything happen with it? Jacob asked, genuinely confused. I submitted it to my manager and never heard anything back. I assumed it wasn't good enough. Your manager marked it low priority, Natalia said, her voice hardening. It never even reached the executive team. It's been sitting in a digital drawer for 3 months, collecting virtual dust. Jacob's stomach dropped. Richard Collins? Richard Collins, Natalia confirmed, her eyes flashing with barely contained fury. He buried your work, Jacob. He buried it so it wouldn't make him look bad. So he could take credit for any successes that came out of his department without having to share the spotlight. I don't understand, Jacob said, shaking his head. Why would he do that? Because that's what people like him do, Natalia said bitterly. They protect their territory at all costs. They make sure no one beneath them looks too good, no one threatens their position. They keep talented people down so they can stay on top. She looked at him, her expression softening slightly. That ends now. I'm going to fix this. You don't have to do that, Jacob said quickly. I don't want special treatment because of what happened tonight. Yes, I do have to, Natalia interrupted, her voice firm and unyielding. I can't fix everything. I can't bring your wife back or make your grief any easier to bear, but I can make sure your work isn't buried anymore. I can make sure you're not invisible. Something in Jacob's chest cracked open, a fissure in the wall he'd built around his heart. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know me. We've never spoken before. Tonight. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible, Natalia said quietly. People look at me and see a title and a bank account, nothing more. They don't see the person underneath. And you go to work every day and people see just another employee, not the father working himself to death to provide for his daughter, not the man still grieving the love of his life. Just someone expendable, someone who doesn't matter. Jacob's throat tightened painfully, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. That's exactly what it felt like, he admitted. Like I was just a cog in the machine, completely replaceable. I'm going to change things, Natalia said firmly. Starting tomorrow. Collins is gone. You're getting the recognition you deserve. Just like that? Jacob asked, hardly daring to believe it. Just like that. I've been blind to what's happening in my own company, but I'm not blind anymore. I see what's been going on, and I'm going to fix it. The waiter returned. And this time they actually ordered, neither really looking at the menu. When he left, Jacob leaned back in his chair, studying Natalia with new eyes. This is the strangest date I've ever been on, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. A genuine smile touched Natalia's face, the first real one Jacob had seen from her. Me too. I've never had a date that started with me crying and ended with my date's career being transformed. Tell me about your daughter, Natalia said, leaning forward with genuine interest. What's she like? I want to know everything. Jacob's face changed completely, the grief and exhaustion lifting to reveal something warm and bright underneath. She's everything, he said, his voice full of love. Smart, stubborn, funny. She wants to be a marine biologist one week and an astronaut the next. She plays soccer and she's terrible at it, but she loves it anyway. She has these big brown eyes just like her mother, and when she smiles, it lights up the whole room. She sounds wonderful, Natalia said softly. She is, Jacob agreed, his voice catching slightly. She deserves more than I can give her. She deserves a father who isn't drowning in grief and exhaustion. I doubt that's true, Natalia said gently. I'm sure she thinks you're the best father in the world. It is true, Jacob insisted. I miss her school plays because I have mandatory meetings I can't get out of. I can't afford to take her on vacations. She wears clothes that are too small because I'm waiting for payday to buy her new ones. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And she never complains. She just smiles and says we're okay. But we're not okay. We're barely surviving. Natalia was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd just told her. What if things were different? She asked finally. What if you didn't have to choose between being there for her and keeping the lights on? That's not how the world works, Jacob said bitterly. Maybe it should be, Natalia said. Maybe I can make it work that way. Maybe that's what I need to do with this company. With everything. Their food arrived, and they ate slowly, the conversation flowing easier now. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and jokes, and small pieces of themselves that neither of them had ever shown anyone else. And somewhere in the middle of it all, something shifted between them. They weren't CEO and employee anymore. They were just two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. As they finished their meal, Natalia looked at Jacob with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Would you be willing to do this again?" she asked hesitantly. "Not as boss and employee, just as two people who understand each other." Jacob's heart did something complicated, a mix of fear and hope that he hadn't felt in years. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "I haven't been ready for anything since Allison died." "I'm not either," Natalia admitted. "But maybe we don't have to be ready. Maybe we just have to be willing to try." Jacob looked at this woman who'd been crying when he walked in. This CEO who was just as lost and broken as he was. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than grief. He felt possibility. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's try." The next morning, Jacob woke up feeling different. Lighter somehow, like something that had been pressing on his chest for 3 years had finally loosened just a little. He made breakfast for Ariel, watching her eat her cereal while telling him about a dream she'd had about dolphins and mermaids and underwater adventures. And for the first time in a long time, he was fully present, not thinking about work, not drowning in grief, just there with his daughter. "Dad, are you okay?" Ariel asked, looking at him with those big brown eyes that were so much like Allison's. "Yes, sweetheart," Jacob said, surprised to find that he actually meant it. "I'm okay." "You look different," Ariel observed, tilting her head in that way she'd inherited from her mother. "Different good or different bad?" Jacob asked, smiling despite himself. "Different good," Ariel said, grinning with her gap-toothed smile. "You look happy?" "Dad." The word hit him harder than it should have. Happy, he couldn't remember the last time someone had called him that. "I had a good night," Jacob said simply, not quite ready to explain everything to his 8-year-old daughter. "Was it the date Aunt Jessica made you go on?" Ariel asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Jacob laughed, surprised by the sound of it. "Yeah, it was the date. Did you like her?" Ariel asked seriously. Jacob thought about Natalia sitting across from him, mascara running down her face, telling him she'd never been loved. He thought about the way she'd looked at him when he talked about Allison, full of empathy and understanding. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I did." Ariel's smile got even bigger. "Good. You deserve to be happy, Dad." Jacob's throat tightened with emotion. "So do you, kiddo. So do you." When Jacob got to the office that morning, everything felt surreal. He walked through the same doors he'd walked through for 4 years. Took the same elevator, sat at the same desk, but nothing felt the same. The fluorescent light seemed brighter. The air seemed fresher, and the weight he'd been carrying for years felt just a little bit lighter. Around 10 o'clock, his phone buzzed with an email from HR. His heart started pounding. As he read the subject line, "Meeting request, executive floor. Jacob Morrison. Please report to the executive floor immediately. Conference room A." His hands went cold, his stomach dropping to his feet. This was it. Natalia had regretted everything. She was going to fire him for making things awkward, for knowing too much about her personal life, for seeing her at her most vulnerable. He took the elevator up with his heart in his throat, his palms sweating. The executive floor was different from the rest of the building. Nicer, quieter, with plush carpeting and expensive artwork on the walls. It was the kind of place Jacob had never belonged. The kind of place he'd always assumed was reserved for people who were better than him. He found conference room A and knocked tentatively. "Come in," a voice said. Natalia's voice, formal and businesslike. Jacob opened the door. Natalia was sitting at the head of the long conference table, dressed in a sharp black suit with her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She looked nothing like the crying woman from last night. She looked like the powerful CEO everyone feared and respected. But when she saw him, her expression softened, the mask slipping just slightly. "Jacob, close the door and sit down." Jacob did as he was told, his heart still racing. I wanted to talk to you before I made this official, Natalia said. Last night I told you things were going to change. I meant it. Natalia, you don't have to— I fired Richard Collins this morning, she said simply, cutting him off. Jacob's jaw dropped. You what? I went through his files, Natalia continued calmly. Yours wasn't the only proposal he buried. He's been doing this for years, protecting his territory, making sure no one beneath him looked too good, making sure he stayed essential. He's gone, and 2 other managers who were doing the same thing are gone.